great day to be here and to be able to open up God's Word in a great passage in Philippians. Again, in case you didn't catch it the first time, I'm Juno, and I'm the lead pastor here, and it is, again, an honor to serve you all here at New Life. But before I dive into the passage, I want you to be able to also experience what my daughter experiences when she takes my grandsons out for dinner. You know, Ezra's the older one, Roman's the little one on top, trying to figure this whole thing out. And they're at a restaurant. Thankfully, it's the restaurant that Daddy runs, and they think they own the place. And from what you could see, they enjoy being there. And it's one of the few restaurants that my daughter takes the boys to because they make their mark, so to speak, in a restaurant. But nonetheless, Dad loves it when they come in. And again, it's almost like some of our pastors' kids. They think they own the place here. You know, they run up and down, they play on the keyboards, we catch them in the drum cage, and that's okay, you know, at least not during church. But nonetheless, life is indeed good. So let me share with you verbally, not with pictures, just another moment with my grandson Ezra. He's the 3-year-old. And I stay at my sister-in-law's home. It's about an 8-minute walk from Mackenzie's house. And it's a big old 7,000 square foot schoolhouse that's been converted to a residential place. And they have this great playroom in the basement. In Michigan, they have basements. You know, you go downstairs and it's all finished and it's a nice place, some of them. Anyway, so Ezra keeps saying, Papa, let's go downstairs. And so we go down this mammoth staircase. You would see it in movies. And it's light upstairs. And we bypass the front doors. It's light. And as we start to go downstairs, it gets dark, really dark. And he goes, Papa, dark? I said, yes. And I says, don't worry. I said, Papa is here. Probably like most of you who are overprotective parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents. It's like, Papa's here, Papa's got you. And he takes his hand, and he shoves it into mine. And we finish the walk down the stairs, and I flip on the lights, and his fear's gone, and he is running that playroom in the basement. Well, I think that's what Paul is talking about in the passage that we're looking at today. Remembering what it's like to have Jesus with him, even in situations that he is very unsure about. And most of us have experienced something like that. A tragedy hits, and people say, well, what can I do? Can I bring you something? And really, what means the most in many, many cases is just your presence. Your presence does more than, well, as you know, your friend's presence does more than they probably could even imagine. And that's what we're looking at when we look at Philippians 4 today. And Paul, goes through his experience. And, he wrote the letter while he was imprisoned. He was chained to a Roman soldier, not knowing if he was going to live or die. And yet this letter to the church, this letter called Philippians, just oozes joy. And the tagline, if you Google it or look it up, it is often referred to as the book of joy. And yet he was not in a good place in life, not knowing if he was going to live or die. And he writes, I'm not sure if he intended it to be called the Book of Joy, but it's been tagged the Book of Joy. The city he's writing to is a proud Roman colony, and they love their Roman identity. Many of us can relate. I'm Armenian, well, half. And, us Armenians are proud of many things. When we have a meal, it is a meal. That's just what Armenians do. They overfeed everybody. Where Paul was writing, the city was proud to be a Roman colony, and they loved their status, they loved their strength. But Paul calls them to a different place. Paul calls them to a different way of life, a joyful, peaceful, Christ-centered life, even and especially during hard times. And so today we're going to be looking at Philippians 4, verses 4 through 10, and I'm going to be reading a verse and then diving into a little bit, going back to the next verse and sharing more about that. You can look at the screen and follow along. You can grab your own devices and look. Just don't go to email or texting during it. Just joking. And then you can grab a Bible that's in front of you in the chair backs to follow along. But let's kick it off here with what Paul is talking about in Philippians 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. This is going to be a pattern with Paul, and we see that he starts it off very strong and encouragement to the people he has helped start a church to rejoice. And it's not optional, folks. We would like to think it is, and our mood swings probably dictate some of that. But Paul is saying joy is not an option. And joy is not to be around your life, only when things are going well. And Paul repeats it because he knows we forget it. We're human. And it is much easier to be joyful, rejoiceful, to be in a good mood when things are going the way we like. But yet we're reminded that our joy, it is not in our health. It is not in our bank account. It is not in our retirement account. And as we know, that could be going doo-doo-doo, depending on the week, the month, whatever's going on in the world. Our joy is not in our jobs. It's not in our family. Or even, as Paul figured out, it's not even in just planting churches, doing the good things. Paul reminds us that his joy and our joy is in the Lord. And so in verse 5, he continues, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. And again, in the Roman culture, gentleness wasn't a prized virtue. It wasn't something that people are going to have on their to-do list, but rather strength and control and dominance. Those were the things that the people were just living in. And yet Paul calls them to gentleness. Let your gentleness show. And why? Because the Lord is near. Now that phrase can mean a couple things, as we know, and you can probably deduce, is that the Lord is near to coming back. Is one way to look at that. And again, I've shared more than once that I had a grandma that swore the Lord was coming back that week because of whatever was going on in the culture. And we could think that sometimes, even in our own culture. But it could also mean that the Lord is near, that his presence is close to everybody, even in their most difficult time. It's like I told Ezra, it's okay, Papa is here. And Paul reminds us that God is here. God is with us. And I know the summer is, I guess we're in the summer, right? Kids are out of school, we're in the summer. A good read for you would be to grab the book it's by Larry Crabb, called Papa's Prayer. It is a great book. I read it years ago. A great book on prayer and from the perspective of Papa, God, our Father. I think it will challenge you. It'll illuminate you. It'll get your mind off of weird things. It'll get you off your electronics and absolutely reading something and taking a fresh perspective on a term and a concept in the church and in many of our lives that we take for granted. But anyway, it's called the Papa's Prayer. And then verse 6, most likely a very favorite verse to many of you, if not for some of you, what people would call a life verse. Do not be anxious for anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, well, oops, that's the next one. I'll hold off on that. And so in other words, pray, don't panic. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Again, just saying the word anxious probably sends up some flags for some of you. Probably pushes a few buttons for some of you. So I am not referring to the idea that I'm fully aware that some of our minds and some of our bodies produce weird things that just lean us toward being more anxious than other people. So if you are struggling with that and are in the midst of that and in the grips of that sometimes, I am not minimizing your struggle. But again, here the word anxious carries the idea of being like we're being pulled in a number of different directions. You know, between now and the end of the month, I think I have 8 guests coming to my home. And so I got to figure out where they're sleeping, when the laundry is going to get done for the next one. Do I have to pick them up at the airport, at the boat dock? Where are we going? What are we doing? And so at times, that could push my anxious button. So, well, then I had to clean up my apartment this weekend. You know, that's the real issue, I think. But nonetheless, we all are anxious about things, or when deadlines are due, or for students, when they're working on all those exams, you know, how do they handle it? How can they not be anxious? But yet, when the stuff of life hits the fan, or you've been broadsided, maybe literally in a vehicle, or just relationally, in a situation at work, with your neighbors. I got a call this week from a neighbor, not from somebody whose neighbor made some improvements, didn't let them know, wrecked a bunch of stuff in the garage. Anyway, it's just like, why does this thing happen? And so that is the type of anxiousness we're looking at today. When some of you break trust. When the spouse that you had committed to, for better and for worse, for richer or for poorer, has a different concept of what that needs. You know, maybe, I talked to a pastor this week. His church is much younger than ours. They had to let go of some people because they had over $300,000 in unexpected repairs to this newer building. And I said, hey, didn't you just get like a $100,000 donation you told me about? He goes, yeah, but that's for another project. But all that to say is, you know, a $300,000 repair bill would rattle any pastor's world, any congregations, because somewhere he's got to come up with that. But stuff happens. And Paul is reminding us, don't be anxious. Now, he's not saying don't ignore your problems. But what he says is let's bring them to God with thanksgiving. And again, why? Because thanksgiving, it reminds us of what God's done in the past and what God can do in the future. It reminds us of God's faithfulness in the good and the bad times. And it reminds us to have our confidence in the God who created us, the God who put us here, who put us with these people, with your spouses, with your kids and your grandkids. It reminds us what God has done in the past, God will do it again. And then here's the result of being anxious for nothing, that the rest of verse 7. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Not just do this thing, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. But the result of that, and much in life, there are consequences. You do something, if I speed like an idiot down the street, okay, I don't think God's going to say, I'm going to give Juno a ticket. No, the police are going to say, we're going to give Juno a ticket. So there's an action and there's a consequence. And so Paul is telling the church, if you be anxious for nothing, give thanks in all situations, then the peace of God will be with you. And remember, Paul was literally chained to a Roman guard. And he uses that word, that and the peace of Christ will guard your hearts and your minds. God's peace stands over every one of us, over our thoughts and over our emotions. You know, you don't have to manufacture peace. You don't have to think, oh, I love Jesus. That's right, I went to church, or I'm helping with this. I gave to the special donation, so will that give me peace? No, the peace that Paul is talking about, and as we have mentioned before, is a peace that goes to the core of our being. A peace that isn't just, oh, it's a nice day, praise the Lord, which is good and healthy to do. But Paul's talking about that peace that digs deep into the soul of our being, and this peace will guide us in all of our situations. And then Paul, bless his heart, thank you, Paul, for not just telling us some things, but he gives us a few more practical tips. He takes it a step further, and he says, think about. Here is where Paul is telling the church then, and which applies to us today, think about. So the question is, what are you thinking about? Now, he gives us some ideas. So are we obsessed with, and what are we thinking about? Yeah, what are the things we're thinking about? What are the things that you go to bed thinking about? What are the things that you wake up thinking about? What are the things that you're just obsessed thinking about? And he says this in verse 8, people. Whatever is true, whatever is honor, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Now the JSV version, that would be the Juno Smalley version, I would say, get your minds out of the gutter, or even use that familiar saying, garbage in, garbage out. And I think most of you know what all that means. You know, Paul is using some words that are very relatable to the culture. But he references them through a Christ-centered lens. And he's saying, pay attention to whatever is shaping your thoughts. And even more now for us today, how easy it is for us to be hijacked, for our minds to be hijacked, for our thoughts to be hijacked because of the media and because of Madison Avenue. So again, friends, so what are you thinking about? What are you dwelling on? And what are you obsessing over? It's sort of like this, that, you know, I like to garden, and that's not new news for many of you. But what you plant grows. If you can consistently plant fear and bitterness, comparison, resentment, or anger, then that's going to be a part of your life. Those are going to be the seeds that's going to be producing some anxiety in your heart. And so really, the idea is that we need to be reflecting not on the negative, but we need to be reflecting on goodness and beauty and the good things in life. Now that's not just let's think happy thoughts and our anxiety goes away. But Paul is again reminding us that our minds can impact our feelings, and that we need to be intentional. Paul's reminding us that our minds are like a filter, and it's easy for, okay, am I obsessed with this situation? Do I need to be asking God to remove this? Do I need to be thinking of something else and to be intentional? And that's okay. And that's why we've talked about gratitude journals, through the month of, November? Because we need to train our mind to be thinking of other things that we have got to be grateful for. And so these verses these verses from Paul give us hope. Give us hope in our deepest and our most anxious moments. Peace really can indeed happen in the storms of life. Paul is in that life and death situation. And you talk about anxious, is he even going to wake up the next day? And I know that what I and so many others have experienced in life, when we experience the loss of a loved one, can obsess you, can make you think life is not worth living. Think that how will you get through to the next day or to the next season? But again, Paul is telling us to be thinking of the good things. And it's just critical that when the stuff of life, again, hits the fan, whether it's a spouse passing away, a child passing away, maybe it's a child making a horrible decision that just breaks your heart, or a grandkid. Thankfully, mine are little enough that they haven't crossed that bridge yet. But what are we planting our minds on? When a spouse walks away, when you're thinking, this is not what I signed up for. And when you find yourself in a very painful situation in life, we need to be thinking on these good things. And in every situation, by prayer and thanksgiving, we can think about whatever may be true. We can think about whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. And if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And so that may be your grandkids. That may be your girlfriend or your boyfriend or a significant other. That may be for the incredible job you do have. But Paul is just saying, think about these things. Again, friends, it's not 8 words to a positive lifestyle. But more or less, Paul is saying, here's a biblical mandate, a biblical way for you to detoxify your heart of the pain and of maybe some anger and bitterness, and to move forward with a heart that rejoices. And again, as many of you know, the more that we think about these things that are not material-based, the more that you'll be able to give thanks. The more you can give thanks as you think through your relationships and the places of community that God has blessed you with. And as you lean on those things that are good, as you lean on the many blessings of the relationships and the community that God has blessed you with, I am confident that some of us who know the old song, that we can sing with every ounce of conviction and truth. That it is well. It is well with my soul, even in the horrible situations of life. So friends, again, Paul ends with powerful words, which need to be a part of all of our mission statements, not just pastors on staff, but each and every one of you. It was mentioned last week, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice. Just do it, folks. A reminder that, again, the context of Paul is that people are already living in community. And so as a great way to think about these things, think about the good things, is to think about the community. And if you're not in one, if you're struggling with that, you've come to the right place. So go to the information tent, put your name in, and we'll do our best to find you a life group to join, or we'll make you a life group leader and you can start a new life group. Because life really is about the relationships. Again, he is imparting on his friends, the people he started the church with, that to learn from others, put your faith in action, live it out. Don't just think about it, but live it out of your life. He is reminding them that you don't know it all. Yeah, you may be a part of a church, but it doesn't mean you know everything. So learn from others. We read it often, have the mind of Christ. We are told to imitate Jesus. We are told that our faith is not just a head knowledge, but we are called to imitate our Creator. And as we imitate Jesus, that will lead us into living a transformed life. And when you consistently live what you've seen in godly people, you grow. Again, it's all about relationships. So my question is, I know the summer isn't the new year, but it's sort of a pivotal point in many of our lives. So my question is, who are you learning from? And who are you teaching? Because we all have those opportunities. And then look, good old Paul tells us in verse 9, and the God of peace will be with you. Be anxious for nothing. Think of these things. Mentor others. And the God of peace will be with you. It's a reminder that God is near. I thought we need to sing a Christmas song. We need to sing a song about Emmanuel, that God is with us. And that even though it's in the middle of July, we need to be reminded that indeed God is with us. And so Paul closes with a shift. He closes in verse 10 as a reminder for every one of us, again, to be thankful. In the first part of verse 10 is, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed my concern for me. Now, Paul's not being sarcastic to the church, saying, about time you remembered me. I was sort of wondering, hey, what's going to happen with me here in jail? He wasn't being sarcastic that way, but he was being genuinely grateful for their support, for their financial gifts, that their financial giving was more of a reflection of love and maturity. And Paul treasured that relationship, and Paul treasured their faithfulness. And so people, it really is about relationships. Most of life is. And it really starts with our relationship with Jesus. And maybe, just maybe, that's why this book is called the Book of Joy. Paul reminds us to get things right with Jesus. That's the J. And some of you have seen this. To have our lives right with Jesus and to be in community with others. So that's the J, Jesus. The O is others. And that as we live out the values that Paul has shared, we will experience rich joy for ourselves. And that's the Y, the J-O-Y. And what's our take home, people? Well, again, as a recap, It's a simple passage, and yet Paul reminds the early church in this letter to his friends of a life that is radically different than what society is saying. And he's reminding them to live a life that is going to probably create some waves, that people will look at you a little differently. And it's because of the presence of God in our lives that we can live a life where joy is chosen. It's intentional, it's not circumstantial. We can live a life where peace is a gift, not something that I can conjure up or that you can, but it's a gift from the Lord. That our thoughts need to be filtered and not uncontrolled. We need to take control of the things we think about. And that faith is lived. It is not just believed. It's not important that you just come here every week or join us online every week. It's critical that what we learn in our head, that we allow God's Spirit to move into our heart and to impact our action. And is that different? Yes, it's different. Is it uncomfortable at times? Yes, that is uncomfortable at times. But when you rejoice in the Lord, when you pray with thanksgiving, when you fix your thoughts on what is true, when you live out what you've seen in others, you just don't get peace. You get the God of peace, the maker of heaven and earth. And God is more than enough to provide you, to provide me with joy that we will need for this journey of life that we are all on. And as we experience God's changing power within us that makes us a new creature, without a doubt, we will be new life for the city, and we will be new life for the city and far beyond, because how God has changed our hearts to be like him. And God's people said,